Thursday, March 13th, meeting to order and make the following announcement. As you know, the electoral board meetings will now be videotaped. The link to the recording will be available on the Office of Elections Electoral Board meeting minutes webpage within 3 business days of the meeting. If you do not want your image recorded, please hide your video. That will be a repeated message now every time. Sooner or later, I'll learn it by heart. Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody and everybody online. Introduce to you the Secretary, Jeffrey Shapiro. Hello, waving at the camera. That's good. The Vice Chairman, Kevin Bigney. Welcome to you. And we've all waved now. Yeah, are there any, is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Are there any amendments?
I'll move to adopt the agenda without amendment.
Second,
Without amendments, I'll second that.
all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. The adoption of the minutes, is there a motion?
I'll move.
Oh, good.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. We will now have the appointment of election officers. We have a very short list. Is there a motion to adopt the election officer appointment list?
So moved.
I do have a question.
Sure.
One of them has the home precinct as listed as out of county.
Yes. Out of the county, they can't be out of state, but they can be out of the county. Same requirements. You just need to be a Virginia voter. They're nodding. I got it right. They're very excited. They're afraid I'll get it wrong. I keep absolutely. We do. There are several, not a lot, but every now and then. So there is a motion to adopt the election officer appointment list of 9 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 8 unaffiliated for a total of 19 officers. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries.
Was the motion seconded?
Details.
Okay.
I thought I heard you second the motion.
I will second the motion.
Yeah, okay.
And just to clarify, I understand, the only thing I've learned from Robert's rules is the discussion, you make the motion, then you have your discussion. You make the motion, you
And
get
you
a second,
and
then you have discussion, questions,
You
whatever, and then we vote.
Wow, you're making progress. You're going to move to graduate school. And
I'll never come close, Kate.
and now on the agenda is the General Registrar's report.
Thank you.
Mr. Spicer.
Thank you. The first couple pages, as usual, is the stats, voter registrations. We call this Bushman section. And we're edging up about as close for total registration to 800,000 as you can get, right? 799,877. But everything stayed about the same. We're 2 months into the year. It's not slow. It's never slow in our office, but you can see the numbers are just, they're not the really high numbers like we had last year. Go to page 2. You can see even in this period, we had 15,000 on DMV transactions. Like I said, it's not slow, but there's nothing really noteworthy on that page unless there are any questions about the stats. Just a typical in-between election month. Then on page 3, polling place changes. Beth, would you give a little, you go out and do polling places, so just briefly.
My voice is really bad today.
Oh, really?
Sorry.
I'll go ahead and say it, I'm sorry. You don't have what I have, Dave. So the Board of Supervisors on January 13th approved a few polling place changes. These are name changes, relocations. In fact, the first 2 are name locations and then 2 relocations. Just let you read through that. But also for the future, much more notable, we're going to have later in the year 3 new polling places that we have to do because of the size of they're way beyond, what is it? I think there's 6,000.
We had one with 7,000.
Right.
One of the things the Board of Supervisors does to us and for us is they change the name of the building where the precinct is. And so we have to go through the ordinance to change the name of the building in the ordinance. So that's a lot of things that go on. That the Jim Scott, where we vote, used to be the Providence Community Center, et cetera. And Green Spring has been moving their precinct around, so a number of those changes, I think there will be, so the Board of Supervisors they have to do it in ordinance, so they make requests and we have large sizes. That'll be coming, I think, later in the year.
So for us, these polling places, the name changes and the location changes would be a big deal for a small jurisdiction, but for us, it's just very, very common. And then the next section on the proposed budget, you probably heard separate from, I'm sorry.
Before we go down to that, so those were changes made by the Board of Supervisors on January 13th, 2 months ago. What, if any, current changes are pending with the Board of Supervisors? Are there proposals in that they're reviewing? Is there anything in the pipeline?
In the pipeline, I don't think I have that list. We have to move Green Spring. Do we have to move Green Spring again? We're going to split Crossroad Coates because it starts with a C, because it's so large. We're going, the supervisor has worked with us to split Cameron Glen because it's so large and it needs to be split, but also one of the remaining half of the precinct will ultimately have to be moved because that building is coming down probably in the next 3 years. Marshall is one of the big ones, and part of it won't add to a precinct, but there's a piece closer to Shreve that the supervisor's office is in sync with. Montebello, we've been for 15 years, well, 10 years now. The Mount Vernon supervisor has been asking us to try to create a precinct out at Montebello because it's a huge facility in terms of retirement, and have a precinct there, but there was no identifiable thing around it for us to identify, and there's some restrictions on what you can do with boundaries. And they finally put a path all the way around it. We didn't have to build Kate's Moat, as we've been calling it, so that will become its own precinct to relieve a precinct that is also large and is in a certain amount of difficulty with its polling place. And I didn't bring the list. How many? There may be one other.
Virginia, the Virginia Hills Administrative Center is.
This happens to us a lot too, as the registrar knows. The Virginia Hills used to be elementary school, now administrative office for the county school division, is going to change the configuration of the rooms that the polling place is. So working with the Board of Supervisors, it's probably going to go to the rec center, the recreation center, which is still in the precinct.
Yes.
The rules, as you know, are that your polling place has to be in, I think it's now within 1.5 miles, used to be 1 mile of the boundary of the precinct. So you can find places around the edges, but you can't go too far away. And
So all of those are now at various stages of proposal and study
Yeah,
with the county supervisors.
what happens is the Board of Supervisors knows about these. Beth spends a lot of time finding locations and working with people to see, and going out to see if they meet the requirements. They have to meet all the ADA requirements and the parking requirements. And that sounds easy, but it isn't. So what did you go see
Well,
this week?
all of those, we wrapped up, we tabled Tyson's that.
There was a
happened this
request
year,
from, to have a precinct in Tyson's in a building that is not big enough. The building is big enough, but there are really not enough people to create a precinct. But there are a lot of other things coming along there. And so probably within the next year and a half, 2 years maybe, because we have trouble there. We had to split that precinct because it was way over 5,000. And now anything we add to it drives one or the other of them over 5,000. So it's.
So these changes that have been described will go for authorization of a public hearing in May. So
These are all.
and these are all May authorization. The public hearing won't be until the end of June. None of these that we've just described that are not included in the GR's report will be in effect for the June primaries. So,
And we have that new Kingstown Government Center as well, which will
Oh,
be
right.
December, which will be November,
Yes,
not
yes.
for June, but for.
Yeah,
Sorry?
to answer your question, it's my understanding, and yes, there you are, that the Franconia building will still be available, the current Franconia headquarters will still be available for the primary. But we're hoping and praying that the new building will be open and it'll move to, the next time the satellite will move there. It will not probably be an precinct for election day, because because Franconia isn't right now. Franconia
Right,
Government
yeah,
Center.
yeah, it's
Police
only early,
station.
it's early.
It's early voting. So that one will be primarily early voting.
Got it. And then I noticed there isn't a precinct, a polling place on Fort Belvoir as such, way down in Mason Neck.
Right, we don't have when we did redistricting, and that's a good question, I'm trying to remember. When we did, well, I guess it votes an army now if they would live there.
or Gunston.
They do it vote at Gunston right now, yeah. It's off basis.
It's always been on base.
We don't have a polling place there. I don't even think I've been on the base to look because it's gated,
Yeah,
so
there are 3 elementary schools on base.
that's true.
Yeah, but that's an interesting. There were not believe it or not, that's a huge precinct because a lot of it is the fort. That there's an area down there with no
Sure.
people in it.
Sure.
Well, that's a good question. Well,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next section is the proposed budget, which came out on February 18th. You've already heard about it. There were $60 million in proposed reductions, and that included $182,000 for our office. May sound like a lot, but it's only just under 2% of our budget. Every department was required to put up 10%, which for us was about $900,000. Countywide, they took their proposed budget as about 3% in reductions for the average department. This $182,000 would be reduction in election day, election officers, reducing 1 election officer for June and 2 for November. And in presenting this possible reduction, we made it very clear this would be very bad, that it would have severe impacts to those officers. We have more duties at the polling places now than we used to. We have the drop box officers. Many things have been added to the polling places. So what we're going to do, if this is taken, is we'll do anything we can to mitigate, to find reductions, to put off filling some of the vacant positions, to try and make up at least part of the 182,000. And the other part, we probably can reduce election officers in, but very, very, what is it, with the surgeon's scalpel.
we heard, yes.
I was just gonna ask you, so when you say this would eliminate these polling officers, is that because the budget actually says that's how we're going to achieve the savings? Do this, and then, okay.
Because they asked, and it's difficult, there are many things that are mandated that we can't put up.
Yeah.
And of course, we wouldn't put existing full-time staff. There are many things you have to run the elections, you have to do the voter registration. So this is one of the possibilities that we could, and it could result, if we took this full effect, we may have to reduce the number of check-ins, which would cause much longer lines, especially in November. So we're gonna do everything we can to not let that happen.
I think it's also fair to say that we heard some issues from some polling places this year, that we had plenty of extra poll workers that we could have used in some of our places more than, we could have used 1 fewer fairly easily. This is, as you know, why I believe so strongly in early voting, is because that we didn't have lines, we could manage it. And also this next year is not a presidential year, our turnout will be down. So I think this will be manageable.
To follow up on what Jeff was saying, is the budget approved by the county granular so that they're in specific line items and you have no flexibility to move dollars between line items?
No, we do have flexibility.
Okay, can I get a copy of the budget?
Sure, and it's,
It's online.
Oh, good, okay.
it doesn't give line item detail, but definitely.
Well, so I would like to see a line item detail budget. Okay, thank you. Because I guess the other corollary is there are these very large precincts with many voters. And there are some precincts, I was helpfully looking at all that online data that had 1,000 people. Right, they're a fraction of the size of many of the precincts, both number of voters wise and also geographic. And so I understand that there's pre-clearance issues, but I've heard about some movements, but some splitting, but to what extent are we also looking at, well, listen, this precinct only has 1,000 people who voted, and this one had 1,200. And there are lots of precincts that have the same staffing level, but they have twice as many, 3 times as many, 4 times as many people who vote. So to what extent do we need to rationalize and make precincts roughly comparable as far as headcount so that we're not, I mean, we're thinking about trimming down the number of election officers. Well, did we not need them last time? Apparently we may not have, we might have been overstaffed.
We don't know SDRs. Well, there are 2 things. We've consolidated a number of precincts over the years. One of the precincts I used to live in has been consolidated 3 times, but it was split because many of our small precincts are not our creation, but the creation of redistricting. And that's most of them. The last redistricting caused us to create 10 precincts of under 1,000 voters. We had no choice. The famous one is in Lee District, and it's, what is it that backs up? Here's the Beltway is at the southwest corner of the
Lindbergh
Beltway.
2 has 97.
Yes, well, and of course, so does, and that's because of redistricting.
So there may not be opportunities everywhere, but there are also small. There are
I think we
opportunities
can
to
consider
consolidate.
this, but not very many. Fewer than you would think because of where the voting place is. And one of the things that happens is access. And we have, for example, 2 precincts at Bailey's Community Center now because we couldn't move what was out. We had to move something from Bailey's to there because the building was torn down. And then, but to get from the Bailey's community to move it out, it's across a creek. You can't get there. We remember that this is a swamp in many ways, and you couldn't get there. So we have 2 precincts there, which are really quite crowded, but there's no other public building there that we can find. So certainly if there are opportunities to consolidate, then we do. We consolidated Graham Greenway several times not long ago. We've consolidated Walnut Hill and Walnut Hill and 2 other precincts with it. So yeah, when we can, we do. That's been my experience in the past, and we still do that.
The other thing that we do is we give a different number of election officers based on the size, based on the turnout. I think it could be helpful. We can give you, prior to each election, we do a resource allocation that we provide to the electoral board. We vary the number of election officers, ballots, voting equipment. So we could give you the last couple of November elections. That might be helpful.
Yeah, the size of the precinct makes a difference of a whole lot of allocation.
Yeah, and so in consolidation, the electoral attributes must match. The law does not allow us to administer split precincts.
Correct. That was your first point, which is the magisterial
Well,
lines
it's not just that.
and the state lines and the congressional district lines and the state district. I mean, there are 4 sets of lines.
Well, it used to be that you could have, if that law passed in 2021, that said that you could not have, we talk about split precincts, it means something different in the code. A split precinct in the code means that this room is a precinct, but you can have that corner over there voting a different ballot. And in 20 or 21, the General Assembly passed a law that says everybody in the precinct has to have the same ballot, that you can't draw the line, you can't take a neighborhood that the line has been drawn and still keep it in that neighborhood. You have to create a new precinct so that the voters in the precinct all have to be voting for the same thing. And that wasn't the case. That's part of what caused us to have these splits.
So I looked at a number of precincts, and maybe a handful of them, and they had 1,000 voters, 1,200 voters.
Yes,
And they have the same, the constraints on consolidation don't apply to the ones that I was looking
well,
at.
I'd love to see a
Okay.
list.
But is that on your radar? Or should we ask you to do it? I mean, I'm just the member of the
It's-
electoral board. You guys are the experts.
It's not really been on the radar. Usually these things, since these are really the purview of the Board of Supervisors, they tend to tell us what's imminently needed because they get the complaints. We don't.
Good, okay.
And sometimes they tell us, as they're telling us now, because of what we said at the end of the year presentation, of what they need to be built in buildings that are in dense populations, so that the buildings will have somewhere in a community, a room big enough to use. So that's part of the issue. But yes, if there's a list, I'd love to see.
Alan Scott.
Go ahead.
The next item is the June primary like voting schedule. We expect a countywide primary because of the offices that are in contention. And we're keeping the same exact schedule as we've had in prior primaries. So we'll start out very small with just 3 locations, including Government Center in North County and Mount Vernon Governmental Center on May 2nd. And then we won't open up the additional 13 locations until the last week, 7 days, not including, 6 days. No, 7 days, because the 5 weekdays and the 2 Saturdays will open as other locations. Again, that's just the same as we've had.
Question, has the Republican Party said they're holding a primary this year or not?
We haven't been
We
told.
know, so it might just be, we know that which parties will hold.
The newly, they're required.
They're not doing a convention,
They can't do that anymore.
that's over with,
Yeah.
For how long
Received the
recently?
writ or whatever that this been declared, yeah, it's state, it's an open primary. So it's, yeah. And there were 3
Yeah, I-
running, aren't there 3 contestants for governor?
Assembly, there's a list of
Primary,
legislatures.
yeah.
Last session or something.
Lieutenant governor's probably that too.
Good, okay. So on those dates, and this, and I apologize, I couldn't look at the law before I got here, on the number of days and the extent of early voting, to what extent is that set by the Office of Elections, the Board of Elections versus the Board of Supervisors? Again, when we're looking at staffing and budgets, the right number and the cost of having early voting, what flexibility does the Office of Elections and Board of Elections have as opposed to county supervisor?
Well, that's changing in the code as well. It hasn't changed, and that goes to the Board of Supervisors completely. The Board of Supervisors has to set locations in the code. I mean, they have to set locations for us. They have to approve, they get to set the locations. And those are in the code right now. They're in there, so we have used those, they're in there. They have indicated at the last report to the board that I did in January, there's strong support for hours and the days that are doing now. There's a piece of legislation that is in the process right now to give them the authority to settle it. I'm not all fond of that. I think that we have the better piece, but it's one of those things.
I mean, when I hear they strongly support, but then I think that they trimmed the budget, how strongly do they support it? And
I
They
can't answer
support it
that.
enough to
We
continue to
provided
fund
2
it.
budget reductions. One was for reducing election day and the other was for satellites. And so they very strongly, they said, we don't want to touch the satellites. They see the growth that so many people voted there. So they backed it up with the budget.
good, can I get a copy of both of those proposals?
Sure.
Thank you, yep, great.
Then we got the confirmation mailing that just went out
Oh,
to 5,617 voters. The State Department of Elections is required to do 1 confirmation mailing per year, but the last year they did 2, and they said they're going to do 2 this year. And this is the responses that we've gotten so far as of March 4th. to the voters that received the confirmation mailing.
Wouldn't it be to more voters? Why is it to, it's 5,000 voters?
That's based on can you speak to that, Bushra, the undeliverable mail?
Yes,
Please
that's
go
it.
up to the podium, sorry.
Yes, so NCOA is based on National Change of Address, Department of Election conducting NCOA for those voters would place on confirmation mailing from the information they are receiving from post office. So for this election, they mail 5,600 for Fairfax County's voter who's out of jurisdiction. They did not mail it for within jurisdiction. So for as the schedule you are seeing, we received back 577 out of state. We canceled those registration, moved within Virginia, 10 that we are mailed it to the other locality, and the total is 1,200 as of March 4th. And today,
Yeah,
the one they did not respond, they will be inactive.
right. But my concern is more just how few are being tested. So are we gonna do another mailing to all the registered
Well,
voters?
this is not our mailing, it's the state's.
This state.
Will we do a mailing this year to all of the registered voters?
We send out the sample ballot mailing every September.
For sample mailing
Okay.
next
And
time.
so anything that's returned undeliverable,
If it comes back, they go on.
And they will conduct another one
That's
probably
when
in
we do
July.
that, the second.
They will conduct another mailing NCOA in July.
Yeah, the state will do another one. in
Yes.
July.
But on this mailing, they have to respond. It's not just, it's not just undeliverable, right?
So if we receive the response from the voter, whatever they respond, if they move within Fairfax, we will update their registration. If they move out of state, we will cancel their registration. It's depend of what they responded. If they do not respond, like we did not receive it and deliver, or we never get back, their status change to inactive.
Yes.
Yes,
So-
without any
Right, so on the
action.
sample ballot, that's the only thing we do is if it's not delivered, they go inactive.
well, we did two things. On the sample ballot, we put it into the confirmation mailing so that somebody becomes inactive if they don't respond to the state's confirmation mailing. So that's a process that happens at least once per year, but more lately it's been twice per year. So that's the basis for it, is the undeliverable mail. But then also by our own choice, we send something. They're not required to
Yes.
respond within 30 days, but we send something and say, looks like your address has changed. And we get a large number of responses to that, to people that have moved.
And that goes to just the ones whose address is changed?
Yes.
Okay, so am I mistaken? I thought maybe last year, we sent out a mailing to all registered voters. No? All right, well, here's another request. Are we gonna do the mailing to those who are on the automatic absentee list?
That's
To ask them
We
if they
did.
wanna opt out?
We did that.
Okay, because that also has,
Generates the same kind of result.
yeah, okay.
Hello.
That's actually connected. So while we're talking about, so we sent out, we're gonna get back to legislation, but we sent out on February 14th, what you were just talking about, Jeff, the permanent absentee opt-out mailing. So we sent that to 69,360 individuals who are on the permanent list. We heard back from a handful of individuals who did not want to opt out, but they were questioning how much we spent on it and whether or not we should have done it. But we also heard back from 538 voters who wanted to be removed from, I should tell you, it cost about $20,000. So it was very economical to send a postcard. And then there were 1,373 mailers returned undeliverable, which that's another action because they were undeliverable. They went. And also, we took them off, when they're undeliverable, we take them off the permanent list. Because if they can't get their mail, what's the point of sending them out? So there's a savings there, actually.
Right.
69,360, was that the entire permanent
Yes.
absentee list? Okay.
I need to add here that we also heard from people that were quite confused because they thought they were being taken off the registration list. And we need to be sure the next time we send that out, that we make it clear that we're talking about the permanent absentee, that their registration isn't being removed.
Right.
Because of the,
Could be a
concern.
drafting issue there.
yeah, it's a drafting issue. You
Right.
got it.
Okay.
Well said. Mr. Registrar, next.
Then we've got legislation. I
Yeah.
think you know the, everything that passed to the legislation about 380 bills, including some for elections. They're sitting on the government's desk waiting for him to either take action or not.
I looked last night and so far he hasn't signed anything that's on his desk.
It's got until the 24th.
Yeah, the 24th is the deadline.
Yeah, that's coming up.
I take it the board doesn't take official positions on pending
Legislation.
legislation?
Yeah,
I
no,
think that's probably fair.
I don't think we do.
No, we don't. Well, we have. Well,
Have
we've
we?
been we are the agitators for extending the
The
time.
time, that was the one.
We are
thing.
the agitators for, there was another one way back when. What was it that it took me years to get the spring one moved? Because we had it, it was the second Tuesday and we got it moved to the third Tuesday because we were conflicting with schools,
Yeah.
the spring primary, and now, of course, it's Emancipation Day, and that's a whole complication again, but we were in the middle of everybody's spring stuff. So we have taken position, we have actually been the agitator for some things. There was another one, I can't remember what it was. It's usually things that as a large jurisdiction, we have trouble doing within the confines of the law.
The extension of time was, the amount of time we have to certify the election.
Yeah.
Was just not adequate.
Yeah.
We were working weekends.
It was all night, every night for a week.
So it's probably been a week or two since I've read through the 10 or so bills that relate to election. Are there some that we should be commenting on, advocating? I mean, they've passed, and now it's up to the governor to sign or veto. Are there things there that we're concerned about that we ought to?
You and I should go over the list afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next item is appointment of election officers. Thank you very much. The last meeting for appointing 7,132 officers. Now my staff has the work of getting them trained, getting them ready. And when you have new voting equipment, as we're going to have, you're required to train every election officer. And you may recall, we're going to be getting an upgrade of our voting equipment in the summer because the express vote is not, the accessible machine is not yet, the new version is not approved. But we're getting that in advance and prototypes, so we'll do the training just once because we try and where we can to save and be economical. So that's appointment of election officers. Next is the office personnel. I think I announced at the last meeting, Judith Clarity. She's become the assistant voting equipment manager. And just recently, Justin, I'll try to say his last name, but he came from the same place that I came from, Alexandria.
They're both sitting back there laughing.
So it took Justin 7 years. I came here 7 years ago from Alexandria. He worked with me at that time. He has joined us here in Fairfax County.
You mean you've had 7 years to be able to pronounce his name and you haven't? It's gonna take me 20, I think, so don't worry.
And then we've got the vacant, shoes are hard to fill. Sean Stewart's old position, voting, absentee voting manager, that is vacant and we're advertising currently.
Have we received any resumes? Have people been submitting applications?
Yes, through the county's process. Yep.
And it'll be advertised until the 14th?
Yep.
So tomorrow?
Yes. And we also contact all the surrounding jurisdictions because we'd like to get somebody with election experience.
And how quickly will, presuming it closes tomorrow, how quickly will we?
Some departments
Select down
take
to a
months.
candidate.
We
Yep.
do it in weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. We go pretty quickly. We want somebody in place for the June election.
In the meantime, we're requiring Sean to do double duty, I suspect.
Okay, but your target is, obviously a candidate has to, they may decide, they may take a couple of days, but your
By
goal is to have
mid-April.
it filled by mid-April.
Finishing up, big finish?
I don't know about that, but we've got FOIAs, they're going along. We've just got a few, 5 FOIAs, 3 NVRA requests. And then I already mentioned a little bit of, or I didn't mention the electronic poll book. If you recall that there's a new version that's now been announced. So a new iPad version, we didn't want to go before, we wanted to get the new version, same price. So that has been announced. So we'll be moving forward. What we did is to extend the current lease to get us through June, and then we'll have a new version for the before the November election.
So now, back on the FOIA point. A number of those, but I guess we get to see on them, are very specific personal related. But on occasion, one of them that came through this last month was a big data dump. To what extent, I mean, we have a good website. Can we have a FOIA reading room that when someone requests a large data set, we would include it just as the FOIA reading room so we don't get asked for it the second time?
Yeah, I don't think we're permitted to do that. The county has a FOIA department.
Have a FOIA reading room. So when you respond to a FOIA and it's of general interest or applicability, all the federal agencies have a FOIA reading room. They just put up their requirements. And it's
I've
there.
tried. For several years, I've tried. If we'd like to take a position on asking that, it's not our operation. And from my perspective as having been here on the Board of Supervisors, even when, in the old days, you had to distribute all the FOIAs to all the press. It didn't matter who asked for it, they got it first and then everybody got it. My view is that it would be better to have a page on the website where all your FOIAs are. I think that's what you're
Yeah,
saying.
it's a reading room.
And exactly, and then we wouldn't have to do this. The county doesn't want to do that. I don't know why. I've asked. Because my view is that once you get it, I get it too. Once it's public, it's not just yours, it's also mine.
Well, another
transparency,
reason that
right?
helps is, while if we get a duplicate request, it's not hard to send out the same
Well,
thing.
they can do that.
But if they can't see it, the request may be a little bit different. Whereas if they go to the reading room, see basically what they want, then that may save us a request. So.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, there are some things that can't be published if they're business, there's a whole category. I've been at this particular issue now for 30 years and I'm not.
And there may be part of the restriction, you have to be a resident in order to get it. So I don't know if that's, you have to be a.
Well, there are some restrictions that you have to be a resident of Virginia to get FOIAs from us. And I don't think I don't know if that's the case for the county.
I think that's.
Maybe I'll look at that and see if we can go around.
Let's just pull this straight at the county level and see what it says. It feels like they're constraining us in a way that the state law is.
Okay.
And we've got the voting equipment replacement project that's going along well. We received the rest of the equipment. We'll have it in place for the June election, with the exception, as we talked before about, for the accessible express votes will come this summer. And the new version, we've got the old version that will get us through June. And then finally, referrals to the Commonwealth's attorney, our monthly referral for individuals that were identified by elect as possibly being non-citizens. We had 26 individuals who were referred by elect, and one affirmed they didn't register, but they affirmed their citizenship. So we referred the remaining 25 individuals to the Commonwealth's attorney and the Attorney General.
Any other questions for the general registrar?
Thank you for that report.
Any questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Moving on to electoral board reports, and I will start. We got, those of us, there was an email on the GR list today that Cord, I'd like to ask you about. It was about security from the registrar in York County, I believe, talking about the changes that the federal government have changed the situation at the Center for Internet Security at DHS, and the question of they notified members of, this is all kind of ISAC and some other kind of SAC. And I think the one that we belong to, and I think we belong to these, that some of this was no longer going to be in effect. It's a little confusing, and I would ask if somebody could look at what's going on here and tell us how that's going to affect our security systems, if at all.
Do you want me to come up and speak real quick?
Yeah, come on up.
I'm gonna have my phone because there's a lot of acronyms.
Yes, I got lost in the acronyms.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms. But what that email was referring to is the ISAC. So that's Election Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center. That is a joint operation between CISA, which is the Center for Cyberstructure and Infrastructure Security Agency. That's a federal agency. And CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security, which is a nonprofit organization. They came together, I don't know when, quite a while ago, probably in the early 2000s. They made EI-ISAC, and it was an organization that counties and cities could join, and they send out bulletins when there's security concerns. They look for what's called malicious IP addresses. So that would be computers that we know are doing malicious activities. They send out the IP addresses so you can block them. When there were disinformation campaigns, that might be something they would send out. You know, be aware that people on the East Coast may be receiving these emails telling them that the election is, you know, Thursday, not Tuesday, things like that. In terms of how we have utilized our involvement in EI-ISAC, several members of us here at Fairfax County were members of EI-ISAC. I went to usually most of the meetings. They were just Teams meetings. You would join and I would listen in. There wasn't a whole lot that was directly applicable to us because we're lucky. We're a large county. We have such a great local infrastructure. We have an amazing security team. They would also be sitting in on all the meetings themselves. They attended all the meetings, you know, all the Teams meetings. They maintained, you know, the malicious IP addresses and that sort of thing. So with EI-ISAC, how I understand it just from reading the news, I haven't seen anything official. I believe it's been disbanded because they cut the funding for it. Would not really affect us personally to a great degree because we have such a great security team. But much smaller counties, I think, are the ones that are going to see effects from that because they were relying on it much more heavily for some of their security infrastructure. And I think EI-ISAC even for smaller counties would do visits and would come out and, you know, help address your security shortcomings.
Okay, I was just a little, in the world of unintended consequences, I just wanted to know how that affected us. Of course, we have Mike Dent, who needs.
We are lucky, others not so much, but yeah, I think for us, it's not going to be a major effect to our operation. If anything changes in that, then I would certainly let you guys know.
Along those lines, next month, we'll have to have a closed session. I'll tell you in advance. I'm remembering that on the security plan that we have to submit later this year, so plan to be here a while in April.
Yeah, or we may, it's not due till August this year, so we might schedule it for later.
Oh.
We don't have to do it in April. It was due in June before, now it's due in August. They moved it back.
I like that kind of moving of deadlines.
So we can plan that and figure out what we want.
That's the deadline that deviates from what the statute says, so that's the deadline that they're giving us grace when the statute doesn't allow us grace, where we had that conversation.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
So I prefer to keep it to the old deadline and
Okay,
get onto the statutory deadline for next year, for the record, not wait till
Okay.
August.
thank you. Next, you.
For new, right? Not for returning, for new topics, just something very small. The legal descriptions of precincts,
Yes.
there's a discrepancy between what the map has and what the legal description says. So we just need to have that cleaned up. Is that Office of Elections or is that someone else in the county that
That's us.
cleans those up? So
Let's do
when we split Willow Springs in 2022, part of the legal description of the precinct for the new Willow Springs 2, it was accurate, but Willow Springs 1, it kept the old boundary line. So we just need to update Willow Springs 1. So you can have that.
If we need to write it up and change it for this next time, we can do that to get it in on this list that's coming up.
Yeah, if it needs to go through the county
It
and the
does.
supervisor,
It
we
does.
will intend to fix
It's
it.
the ordinance.
I can show you the exact sentences that are on.
It's the ordinance.
That's all I have for now.
Nothing from you? Okay, then we're through electoral boards. New business?
So I do have some new business.
Okay,
Or, I'm sorry, I got them backwards. That was my new business.
okay. How about, do you have electoral, how about old business?
Old business, yes.
All
I
right,
have
let's do old
Old
business.
person, then new. Actually, no, old business is there. I have no new business, but I do have old business.
Okay, we'll go to old business.
Okay, old business, thank you. Just a housekeeping thing. Going through the procedures, policies, guidance, instructions document. I do have proposed revisions to it, but I'd also like you to expand on a couple of them that are at a summary level. This is what we got last This is a copy of what we got last
I have the
meeting.
request procedures, yeah,
When
okay.
did we get this?
At our February meeting.
Okay.
At our January meeting, we had requested a list of all of the rules that apply.
Yes.
And
yeah,
in
okay.
February, we got a copy of it. And so I
Yes.
just I've had a chance to review it. And I don't know if I should add, well, I would like, please, on general number 5, elect official advisories regarding policies and procedures. If you can schedule them, just give us the list. There are some really nice lists in here on the financial policies, whatnot. We need the same kind of granularity for policies and procedures from elect. Realize that's a moving target because they send out materials, but let's get one that's up to date. On the federal laws, we should also include the Code of Federal Regulation, and in particular, specific sections of the code that apply to us, 28 CFR 55, for instance, but there are others. Again, we want to have a one go-to place. This is the set of rules that apply to us. So if we could expand those, that would be helpful. Thank you. There, and this is a little more to expand that. There's also churn down on some of these other ones, the verbal guidance from elected, I'm not asking for that to be scheduled, but number 5, when they send official elect directions, we just need to have the list. Thank you.
Okay. Did I ask you if you had any old business?
No old business.
No old business?
Nope.
Okay.
I have one more matter of old
You have
business.
one more.
Sorry, that was a bookkeeping one more.
Okay,
In advance of this meeting, I had circulated a draft policy as, this is on the topic of minority languages,
Right.
which we raised in January and then we discussed in February, and the proposal was, well, send us what you have in mind. So helpfully, and this dovetails with the registrar's goal of having a position who is an individual who's responsible for the minority languages. When you go to the federal law and the code of the CFR that I just talked about, there are 4 or 5 specific elements of a minority language program. One of the interesting things is that I think my understanding is currently we do everything uniformly across the county. The federal law allows more nuanced approach. So the precincts where we have language helpers, some determination has been made that those are the precincts where the demand is such and the population is such that we should have language helpers. Well, so there are a whole bunch of responsibilities that we have under the language section. And so the proposed policy parrots those to a large degree, and it would place in one individual the responsibility to go through those, both the responsibilities and the flexibilities under the federal law, and propose a plan that would fit with those requirements that may be more tailored than what we're doing now, more nuanced. So that's the first thing it does. It just kind of gives the job description of what that position would look like. I know it was on the drawing board. We hadn't gotten to the job description stage yet, but this would really flesh out the job description. But it has 2 other corollaries, one of which I know is difficult and controversial, or at least difficult and maybe not controversial, and that is whether to continue to support or expand the support of languages that are not mandated by the federal government in their 5-year review, but that there's objective criteria that suggest that we should support them. We currently do that for Korean. The numbers are very much similar for Chinese. And so I understand that changing from 4 to 5 languages now was hard. Right? And so maybe that's the very last element of the proposal. And so we can talk about, section 5, part 2 separately, but more broadly, the idea is to regularize and have a policy in place for how we support the minority languages, to tighten up what we're doing now. And I am advocating that we use the annual American Community Survey as the benchmark. And if there are 10,000 people who do not speak English well, and that's what they're measuring, that we would include that language. And for now, that would include both Korean, which is discretionary, and Chinese, which is discretionary. And we would just benchmark off of that and have that as the rule. But if that's controversial, then we would just stick.
I actually printed these because I thought we might be going to talk about it.
Okay.
This is.
Wait, talk about acronyms.
I know, and they're absolutely impossible.
IN,
To let's,
opioid, land
I
count.
don't even
MPOP.
try to read them. It's the yellow line. I'm reminded as I read the minutes back from when we did this the first time and the second time. to talk about what it was that we did when we did Korean. And at the time, and I have those minutes, but at the time we added Korean, the number was, for Vietnamese was 10,000 something low. It is now in the requirement 10,700. The number for, and this was just 5 years ago, and almost the same number. This is the 2021 determination. So we first did it in 17, and then we did it in 15, I guess, in 16, then we did it in 21. And the reason that we did this is the 21, these are the 21 numbers, is that we knew, and as we knew at the time, that the actual population in Fairfax County of Korean speakers was higher than the Vietnamese speaker, which you see here actually on this one under BAPA. It's the third column. And so since they were so close, we went ahead and added Korean at the time. We did that then and haven't changed it since. We did it in, I guess, 16. I haven't changed it since. I think 16 was the first time we were asked to print in other languages. I don't remember if we did Spanish before that or not, because I wasn't here. But we did it then, and we haven't changed it since. The other piece of that in the history is that we had requests for other languages. And we looked at the data that the request for Arabic was the other language we had in 17. And there were two problems with the data. This section does not track because the census doesn't think of Middle Eastern languages and North African languages as census categories. So that's coming up, by the way. I read that the next census will use MENA to get Middle East, North Africa, to get that as population. So we didn't have that data, but we had some data from the school division that we used in terms of languages spoken at home that the school division has. And that did not reach the threshold any closer. So that's the history of how we got here. How we go forward to different things, but I just wanted to clear up that we did use a chart that looks almost like this one, but was much older to start with.
And you were doing this determination in the same year that the federal government had
The same
was
year,
redoing.
both times.
the-
Both times. We did it for the 2010 census, I guess, in 15, and then we ended up implementing it in 16. And for the 2020 census is now what we're waiting. And then we got a midterm there. And whatever's half of 2015, 2016 was the midterm. And then next year will be the midpoint to tell us something else. We got this, I believe, after the census. This one is after the last census. It's every 5 years. So this is after the census and then after the midterms, as we taught it. So yes, so it's tough to do, but that's how we got to where we are. We had, and we haven't changed. We haven't changed. But I wanted to be sure that everybody understood how we got here.
Great, and so I guess I would.
Did you have a handout of the director
Of the.
of the position you're talking about?
Sure, here.
Oh, no,
I meant to make copies. You and I got talking before the meeting, so I didn't make
Okay.
copies for everyone.
Oh,
But I understand that it was emailed in advance to all the members.
it was.
So a couple of things. One is the census does publish the American Community Survey every year.
Mhm. I've got,
It's packaged differently than what section 203 of the federal
Mhm.
law requires as far as the metrics. When you look at the most recently available, the number for Chinese, and this is something did I also include an email, the backup information? I think I did as well, yeah.
not the backup, I just got the
Yeah,
cover
Did I-
copy.
it's just the
Just,
two from that were yours.
I haven't, just the cover
Okay.
copy, I haven't seen the backup.
Okay, so it's a spreadsheet similar to this, but the number for Chinese now in Fairfax is 10,560.
That's not voting age, though, right?
Well, as I said, so the number is a little bit different. The metrics are different because the American Community Survey is a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for like an objective criteria to measure, so the one issue is, do we want to look at this more than every 5 years? If we end up having 10,000 or more, do they just simply have to wait till the next 5-year increment, or do we want to do it more regularly? And the answer may be no.
Yeah, I mean, just to give my view of it, I don't think we need to do it more regularly. I also think that the Voting Rights Act, it's been around a long time. It's a relatively smooth running structure. And they use voting populations optimized for their purpose, which is the voting aspect, not just general language skills, but, among the voters. So my view is that we should, first of all, I think we can defer this discussion because the numbers are going to change next year. Even if we want to depart from them, we need to kind of know what they're doing. So I kind of feel, and I read the procedure. I didn't study it in detail, but I read through it. I thought it was very well written and a great foundation for looking at setting up a director of languages. I think probably if we should probably do that all at once, rather, the office has plenty of things to keep it occupied, and that issue is not upon us. The issue will be upon us next year. We have to make some decisions next year, which is either do what the federal government tells us to do or do something more than that. And I think, at that time, we can look at it, we look at what the numbers are. We can, compare it to the other markers that you're thinking we should use to understand better. I will confess to being uneducated on the subject in terms of the different population markers and so forth. So it seems to me that if we next year, the board next year, whoever on the board should take a look at it holistically at that time. And then that can also include deciding they want to do it more than every 5 years at that point. In other words, it's a holistic look at all the questions you're raising.
I have a question for you. One of the things that we have in I'm not drowning in paper in a director. What we might do today is ask the registrar to give us some advice on, as we wait to do all the numbers for next year on this position. Because to me, director in the county is a term of art. And I don't think we want to call it that. I think we want to have the registrar look at how, where and how, if we were to do this next year, that we would put it together in a position, because a term of art is going to be a budget buster. And I think we want to
We
think.
might have to pay them more too.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, the other thing, just the other point that sparks is that we really need to consult with the office. The office has been handling this requirement. They're doing very well. It's a lot of work and it's kind of a pain. And it has the potential to get people out in the public upset very quickly. So I think we need to take time to study it, and maybe this is the good year to start studying that as opposed to making decisions. I certainly don't feel like I know enough at this point to make a decision. I do know that these guys have done a great job in the 2 years or whatever it is that I've observed them in handling the language issue. We had a great catch in the last election where elect had I don't know if it was a mistranslation so much as the translated version didn't have the right directions. We caught that and addressed it locally. So these guys have done it, the office has done a good job. I don't want to interfere with that either. I want to be very careful.
Let me ask you, if my memory is correct about the history here a little bit. When we started doing this, when we were and of course it started, I think, just about the time you got here, so bless your heart. when we started with the additional languages, it was solely our responsibility to do it. We didn't have, the state didn't, there was no one else in the state that was required to do any of it. In the last 5 years, I believe Prince William has been required to do Spanish. That's it across the state. So it would be interesting to see what happens in the next year, assuming we're still doing it. The next year is to see what the state's role actually, because I think we would need that help, what the state's role will be, and if there are other jurisdictions required to do various languages. I was always surprised that we were the only one. Part of that's because the 10,000 number. We're just so much bigger than everybody else. The other thing that I learned a little bit about, and that I would like for us to be able to hear from, is how other localities do this. Ravi isn't here tonight, but he went visiting. And he went visiting to Los Angeles on how they do it. And then he found out, I believe, about how New York does it, because there gotta be jurisdictions that do more than we're doing with, but we have this diversity that is incredibly diverse, to use a word like. And they're big enough that they have, and if my understanding is correct, somebody can change my mind, and who's ever talked to him, but they have their own equipment that will deal with this in a way that allows them, they have equipment that's specially, voting machines, I guess, that are just for Los Angeles and New York City. I'm a great believer here in that the technology will ultimately help us do this. And I would like for us to take a little time, if it's okay, and see what the options are for the various machine equipment that we have now to allow print on demand and those kinds of things, and to address our absentee, to see what the capacity is for increasing the number. Because I thoroughly believe that technology will ultimately help us address this, that we're not there yet. And of course, we in Virginia have the layer of having to have all of our equipment certified. We've just been through that with the new machines to be sure they get certified. Any changes are required. So I would love to see us look at that on the long term to.
Well, since you did, made that decision, though, things have, the absentee ballot
Has
has gotten
changed.
worse. I mean, it's
Yes,
from the standpoint of the logistics
the logistics, yes.
on different languages. So, because print on demand doesn't help us with absentee ballots at this point.
No, well, no, mail-in it doesn't.
And that,
Correct.
I meant
You
mail, I'm
mean
sorry.
mail-in.
Yeah,
That's a-
mail-in absentee.
And I have no idea how jurisdictions, some of the, you're familiar with some of the jurisdictions that do it totally mail.
Well, and that's what I find interesting in looking at the federal law on this, is that a county the size of ours doesn't need a one size fits all across every precinct. If you're in a precinct where
That's
you have a language helper, that ballot ought to be in the language where the language helper is needed. If you are in a part of the county that we don't have a language helper, there is granularity available, and most of this document deals with bringing home or domesticating those concepts. So we now are doing language, but we're doing it on a one size fits all basis, as the whole county gets every language. The law doesn't require that, but it takes mental bandwidth to figure out what the right approach is. Because if we go to Los Angeles, go to New York, what you're likely going to find is that it's more nuanced to get the right languages
And
to
I
the
think
right
we need to know
communities.
that.
And so point taken on, let's revisit this next year, but in the interim, this is a job description that I would invite a registrar to use as they are thinking about this new position or this new role, but it's actually an existing role, right? We already have minority language support, and there is flexibility under the federal law to not have to blast 7 languages. When I go to the school website, there are 7 languages in
Yes.
addition to English.
Yes,
And if we have populations that need that,
and they
okay.
have changed over the years that I've been watching the school, which was 7.
No, I do think we need to benchmark to an objective standard, so we should stick with what the census is doing. So if it's 4, it's 4. If it's 5, it's 5. I don't think you should do 7 or 10. There are lots of languages spoken in Fairfax County. You have to draw a line, and I'd rather let the federal law do the speaking when it comes to drawing that line, or at least articulable basis. But the idea is, let's have someone who's currently, whoever's responsible now for minority languages, let's look and see how to use the flexibilities under the federal law so that maybe there are some ballots that only have that precinct, they get two languages, right? And the absentee ballots for those precincts will get the 2 because that's where the voters are and that's what they need. On other parts of the county, you might get 3 because that's who's, I mean, we already know that information because we have language helpers. We want to assist people to be able to vote and have neutral guidance from, official guidance. So we don't need to, Google Translate is wonderful, but, I speak a couple languages and it gets so far, but we, I agree with the technology piece, but what I propose is let's at least begin to use these flexibilities or begin to develop the plan, because it's a plan and we'll all want to understand what the plan is because we want to make sure that the services are provided that are needed. But if we're doing too much now, we're doing too much now. It's more complicated than it needs to be in parts of the county.
How about if we, I guess what I'm hearing, let me see what I'm hearing you say. We would ask the registrar to look at this and give us, I'm particularly concerned about the title because, as I say, it's a term of art in the county. And so he needs to tell us how if we would refer that to him and ask him to give us, come back with an outline that he thinks would address, along with all the other with input from everybody else, what that position would look like that would work here in Fairfax County. In the interim, as we spend the time getting ready for next year, is that acceptable?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what are we doing now? I mean, somebody's doing
Yeah.
it.
That's a good question.
As with many things, it was just given to an individual who speaks one of the languages. We have had a very sparse staff historically. This individual is right now on long-term medical leave. But fortunately, that's the person who speaks Spanish and has done that very well and has led the effort under Bushra. But we have individuals that translate in the languages. So it's not like that's not going to happen or happen really well. It's just the person who's managed it isn't here very much right now, some long-term medical issues. So far as this, but we'll get it done. So far as this is concerned, Kate, your priority familiar with, there's a workforce planning process. I can write the best job description you've ever seen and call it whatever. Right now I've got it like language coordinator or something like that. But they give them a submission twice a year. We have workforce planning meetings. Typically it takes about a year, which could fit in with what you all are talking about. Whatever we do with this position, that we're in the really early stages. I need to get it through the process. And all that's just to get the job created. They analyze it. The county has HR staff to specifically look at position, what it should be, how it should be graded, that sort of thing. And then of course, if we got to take a vacant position, because we can't get a new position if we got a new position, that'd be the budget process, that'd take 2 to 3 years. But the quickest is through the workforce planning process, get a vacant position reallocated. So that's at least 6 months, but then go through and advertise it. It's about a year, the whole process.
But before we do that, I think that as we do that,
Right.
I think that it would be good for you to come back. We meet in April with an assessment of how you would might place that in the process and where in the structure of the organization, because I'm hearing him say something that makes me think that we need to look at what we're doing now, because I know we're doing part of it and we're doing it unofficially, and we need to include the allocation of election officers in who's at what poll and how we do that. And that's a different part than just which languages and how we get it translated. That's the operational part. And if I understand it, you would think that this might be involved in developing that as well. We get some, for those of you that don't know, we do get some help with, we have a history, I believe, of which precincts. We know that. We don't have a very structured way of looking at it and how it changes, of which precincts, it might not be hard because we might be able to tell it by school population, actually. Of which precincts need which language help. We have some people in the community that send us every year, or send me and I forward it on about where the Korean and Vietnamese language, where we particularly need Korean interpreters. We need to, I think I hear you saying we need to kind of have somebody, that one place that comes together. That may not be as complicated even as translating it, because we have, and that's going to be a talent that we assign to people to do. It would not be the language, but we don't expect, I don't think that the language coordinator speaks all the languages that we're going to do that. It's not the translator.
That's right.
So is that acceptable if we ask him to come back and?
The other thing that I think fits very well with this, as I said, it's just where it was historically, just because the person spoke that. But why in the world would it be in voter registration? To me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what I had proposed, whatever this position is, it should really be in election administration. That's where the election officers are, the forms are, all the stuff that gets translated. It's not in voter registration. So I think that's the first step. And definitely, I'm very much in support of, because I already want to do that, is to identify what should this position do, what are the duties, what are the.
And I think that's great. And part of the effort is going to be, the federal law contemplates that you have a plan. And the plan will take time to think through. Right now, we just said, okay, blast it everywhere. And it can be more nuanced, it can be more reflective of their
Yeah,
actual
I mean,
community.
you have to
And so
balance-
someone has to think through that. And then the lawyer, Marty's going to want to weigh in to make sure he feels it works as a plan under,
Yeah, and you have to
Plan
balance
55.
nuance creates complexity, creates more room for error, more room for people complaining about disparate treatment versus one size fits all.
True.
So I'm not prejudging it. I'm just saying, there's a yin and a yang to this.
Yes, there is.
So.
And I think that's something that we'd want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, and people have to operationalize it. I don't think we need to, I think we can move on.
I think so.
But let's formalize this in a motion, shall we?
Yeah.
Shall we do that?
Yes.
I will move that, the registrar be requested to look into the creation of a position to coordinate the languages, whatever the name of the position is, and start planning for how we're going to kind of
Transition.
move that into the election management and also, vest it in a particular person
For next year.
for next year.
I'll second that.
Heaven forfend that we should have more discussion, but I'll ask for more discussion.
I'm disgusted.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Great.
Is there anything else?
I rest.
Huh?
I rest.
You need it? Okay. We're now down to public comment. We remember the rules, we remember the rules. We're going to ask you to come to the podium and speak to both us and our cast of thousands out there, may not be 1,000. And tell us in 3 minutes what you think we need to know, and we'll be glad to hear you. Christine, are you first?
Sure. I have 4 short factual questions.
Okay,
If they can't be dealt with immediately, that's fine.
we'll see.
Christine Grimm.
Christine,
Right, Christine Grimm, Republican, that's party. So do we know when the second confirmation mailing will go out? And if there are responses to that, which would affect making people inactive, will that be done in time for the November election?
I don't have a date. I don't think we have.
Yeah,
That's a great question,
Yeah, it's
considering
July.
the events of last year. Right?
Probably, you want me to answer that?
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably July as what's the
And will it be in time for?
definitely.
Well,
That's
actually,
after 30 days.
Well,
Time
I'm
out.
a daily email.
That's, yes, you are.
okay.
No, you're never allowed to time out. I think we've got several people talking in the room for the cast of thousands out there. Yes, the mailing will go out, I suspect, in the end of July or August. That's about when the question is, will it be done in time? And that is dependent on it, that does it go out to
Well,
pull people off?
it also depends on what done in time means, because
Yes.
we can't remove people, well, it's dicey to take action, right, within 90 days of the election, or is it?
Yes, it is, Dicey.
Or is
How
it
did
60?
you notice that?
Is it 60 for the state? I can't remember.
It's not.
Federal.
It might be 60 days, but so is your question, will we be able to, sort of bring our roles up to date based on that information?
Indeed.
Yeah.
It's a question for the state.
Is that something we should look at and calculate?
But the NCOA goes out, the state doesn't. So
Yes, so
if you'd like us, I mean, that is a issue directed to the state. Do it in time for the locals to take care of.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about the?
NCOA. And
I
the
think-
Confirmation mailing you're talking about is the NCOA.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, Bushra last year was about July, and they had 30 days to respond,
Yes.
and then they go to inactive,
if
so.
they do not respond within 30 days, automatically they will be inactive. So no action needed. If they
Maybe
do
that-
not respond,
So you're not taking them off the roll.
they will be
Uh,
inactive.
out from the NCOA.
Okay, fortunately, the 3 minutes applies to what I say.
I will agree.
got
that
some of
we
that
took
time.
2.5 of them.
Well, this is, since this meeting is now being recorded,
Yes,
and it is at the Fairfax County YouTube site, could you request the county to create a playlist specifically for your meetings so that it is easier for the public to find just these meetings and not have to flounder through the dozens of other constantly produced videos? Okay, that was number 2. Number 3 is on the on the pipeline of all the different things that are happening with our election officers. They've been appointed. Now they need to take the oath, which they can do online. And I know Robbie isn't here, so Gretchen is our subject matter expert. Could we make it a monthly report so that we could know how many have taken the oath of the ones that were appointed? How many have taken the training who need to take the training? In other words, we can see the progress as it happens. This would be useful for both parties. And I think it's also something the public has a compelling interest in knowing what the flow is through this pipeline of various specific things that our election officers have to do to be able to actually serve. I'm particularly focused on November, but obviously the primary is an issue too.
I think that's a great idea, and that could be added to the registrar's report, perhaps?
Yeah, just to keep us on top. And the final and 4th question is, we greatly appreciate that the registrar is referring the non-citizens who have not gotten back or who have said, yes, I'm a non-citizen, to the Commonwealth Attorney. But my question is there a follow-through that can be done by the registrar and then reported back to the public, or by the Electoral Board directly to the Commonwealth Attorney to say, what are you doing about it? And if not directly to the Commonwealth Attorney, does the registrar or the Electoral Board have a role to ask the Attorney General of the state about this issue of their being referred? What then action will be taken? I'm asking who has the authority, what's the process, and obviously, is there a way to get that started? Because people need a feedback loop.
good question. We'll look into it.
Thank you.
We'll look into it. My general understanding is that those would be essentially confidential matters, investigations. If that's what we're talking about.
The individual cases is great, but what the public should know is what is the process and if any follow through is being done. If it's going into a black pit or a black hole by being referred to the Commonwealth Attorney, it is what it is. But we'd like to know if there's any way anyone has the authority to find out what's happening.
Okay, do we have anybody else in the room? How about online? Beth, do you have my computer? We went dark hours ago. Okay, not seeing anyone or hearing from anyone. Is there any other business to come before us? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Hey, Beth, for June, I'm gonna have a conference